They circled your name like wolves starved for the scent of weakness, not realizing that what they had mistaken for fragility was a quiet sharpening of steel, of silence, of soul. They came chanting your downfall like it was a foregone conclusion, drunk off the illusion that your stillness was surrender. But stillness is not surrender. It's the moment the guillotine hangs in the air, seconds before it drops. And you've always been the blade, never the neck. They tried to stage a public execution, whispering poison into ears they thought mattered, smearing your name with dirt they couldn't even spell right. They wanted your head served on a silver platter so they could clink glasses over the illusion of your extinction. But what they forgot is that when you come for a storm, you best be built like a lighthouse. And they weren't. They were sandcastles wearing crowns of arrogance, temporary, fragile, laughably unprepared. They thought cutting ties would make you bleed, but you don't bleed like them. You don't unravel, you combust. They forgot your ruin isn't tragic, it's tactical. When they left you in the dark, they expected silence, not strategy. But while they danced on graves they thought belonged to you, you were beneath the soil, building roots, building venom, building volume. You didn't crawl out of hell just to ask for respect. You came back to set the whole blueprint on fire. Because respect built on convenience is just fear in a mask. And they only knew how to fear what they could control. They couldn't chain you, so they called you crazy. Couldn't manipulate you, so they called you dangerous. Couldn't kill you, so they wrote your obituary anyway. But this pen writes in blood, and your story isn't over. It's just shedding its skin. What they failed to understand was that you were never seeking their throne. Thrones rust, crowns crack. You were building something more potent than royalty. You were becoming inevitable. And the inevitable doesn't knock. It breaks down the door with the same grace they mistook for weakness. You stopped playing chess with people who couldn't tell the difference between pawns and landmines. They underestimated you because they couldn't predict you. You became everything they said you couldn't be in silence. And nothing terrifies liars more than someone who doesn't explain their vengeance, but embodies it. You didn't clap back, you carved space. You didn't expose them, you let their panic do it for you. Because the truth has a pulse, and every time it beat, it screamed your name. They wanted you erased, but you were etched into everything they tried to rebuild without you. You haunted their group chats, their alliances, their fragile ego-fueled gatherings where your name tasted like threat disguised as nostalgia. They tried to copy your fire, but matches don't mimic wildfires. They thought exile would crush you, but exile became your empire. The outcast became the outline for a blueprint they couldn't decipher. You learned the art of war in the silence of being discarded. You mastered strategy in the echo of fake apologies. You weaponized everything they tried to use against you. And now, every insult, every betrayal, every cold shoulder is a sharpened edge on your blade. You are not the same as them, not the same as before. The old you died in that battlefield they mistook for drama. What came back wasn't a revival, it was a rebirth laced in fire and exactness. And you didn't come back to be acknowledged, you came back to be reckoned with. Because when you stop needing validation, you start radiating a kind of chaos that can't be tamed. You became the ghost they couldn't bury, the fire they couldn't extinguish, the truth they couldn't spin. And every move they make now is tainted by the fear that you're watching, calculating, smiling with that silence. They finally understand wasn't defeat, it was design. You are not in competition with them. That would be a demotion. You've moved beyond the battlefield. They're still throwing stones while you're sculpting cities out of ruins. You didn't just survive the slaughter. They made you the butcher. Their weapons taught you precision. Their mockery taught you patience. Their dismissal taught you dominance. And now, you're not chasing revenge. You're the revenge. Every step you take is a response. Every breath you exhale is a verdict. You walk like justice, wearing a smirk they never saw coming. You don't need to yell, they hear you in their silence. You don't need to confront, they feel you in their guilt. You don't need to return, because they never really recovered from your exit. You've become the very warning label they forgot to read, the fine print they skipped while plotting your downfall, the consequence they assumed would never bite back. They looked at your pain and saw potential entertainment. But pain, in the hands of someone like you, becomes prophecy. They made you suffer publicly, thinking humiliation would end you. Instead, you turned their stage into a crucible, and what emerged wasn't broken, it was blistered with brilliance. Their eyes sting now, not from your flames, but from the reflection of what they couldn't destroy. They lost you, and in doing so, lost the only thing that made their fake kingdom feel real. Now they roam with crowns made of guilt and mirrors they're too scared to look into. Because the guillotine they tried to tie you to turned out to be your throne. And the sound of your rise? It's not thunder, it's the echo of everything they failed to bury. You speak now without speaking. You dominate rooms without entering. You haunt their victories because deep down they know they were built on borrowed light. And you were never light. You were lightning, flashing, fierce, unpredictable, and deadly to anyone dumb enough to fly too close. They used to ask what happened to you, but now they ask what you're planning. They measure their moves by your silence, calculate their peace by your distance, pray that your indifference is mercy and not delay. But you don't grant mercy. You grant reminders. You are the lesson dressed in flesh, the storm that learned to smile, the final chapter they forgot they wrote. You don't have to chase them. They're already running from shadows you haven't even cast yet. Your existence is a countdown, and every tick echoes louder than their applause ever did. Let them pretend they're winning. Let them enjoy the illusion, because you're not done. Not even close. You've only just started to unsheath what they buried. And once the blade drops, no one ever forgets what a guillotine sounds like. The blade never needed to chase them. It only needed to be seen. And now, its shadow stretches over every fake smile, every echo of the lies they built empires on. You've become the reckoning they never accounted for, the ghost in their victories, the pulse in their paranoia. Every time they look over their shoulders, it's not fear of the past, it's fear of what you've become, because you didn't return for closure. Closure is for the weak-hearted. You came for collapse, for the systematic dismantling of every delusion they wrap themselves in. And your silence is surgical. They don't know when it'll strike, but they feel it, like cold steel inches from their throat, humming with history and hunger. You didn't scream for justice, you became it. When they twisted your truth, thinking it would break you, They misunderstood the science of storms. You don't break, you build. Every betrayal was a brick, every rejection a blueprint. And now you tower above them, not for applause, but for perspective. You needed the height to see the full map, to watch them squirm beneath the weight of their own schemes. They weaponized rumors and thought it would be enough. But you don't fight with words, you fight with legacy. You don't argue, you outlast. And now their sentences taste stale in their mouths because your success rewrote every story they told behind your back. You turned your pain into poetry, and now every line stings like a scar they carry in secret. They tried to exile you, and instead exiled their own peace. Because your absence wasn't silence, it was strategy. While they were busy counting your failures, you were stacking them into a throne made of everything they feared you'd become. And now that you've become it, they can't unsee it, can't unfeel the weight of what it means to have underestimated the storm they themselves summoned. They wanted to be gods in your story, but now they're footnotes in your transformation. Forgotten villains in a tale rewritten by the very one they tried to erase. You don't seek revenge like they imagined. This isn't pettiness. This is precision. Vengeance without noise. Ruin without fingerprints. Your wins don't shout. They echo. Quietly. Permanently. You are no longer trying to prove them wrong. You're proving yourself inevitable. You weren't built in the light. You were forged in the furnace. And it shows. Not in your rage, but in your restraint. They thought your silence meant peace, but it meant planning. And now that the plan is in motion, there's no stopping the collapse. They danced around the idea of your downfall so long. They didn't notice the ground cracking beneath their feet. And when the dust settles, it won't be your name buried. It'll be theirs, under layers of self-inflicted irrelevance. You became the curse they accidentally cast on themselves. They tried to make you feel replaceable, forgetting that uniqueness cannot be replicated. It can only be feared. They copied your steps, but missed the rhythm, quoted your essence, but lost the context. They tried to become you in your absence, but forgot one fatal truth. Legends are not inherited, they're earned. And your scars are your signature. They wear masks while you wear your wounds like armor. And armor doesn't flinch, it reflects. And right now, every time they look into the eyes of someone who still speaks your name with respect, they see the reflection of their failure. They wanted your light dimmed so they could shine, but all they managed to do was reveal their shadows. You didn't block their path, they built their own walls. And now they knock on doors you no longer stand behind, hoping proximity to your name will save them from the reputation they earned. But you are no longer a name, they can't even pronounce what you've become. They wanted a warning. Now they're living in it. You don't haunt them with threats. You haunt them with silence. You don't need to curse them. They curse themselves the moment they mistook your humility for helplessness. You move different now, not out of fear, but out of understanding. The battlefield taught you who bleeds when the lights go out, and it wasn't you. You became the weapon and the war. Not because you wanted to be, but because they left you no choice. You aren't angry anymore. Anger is loud. You're focused, and focus is fatal. They mock what they can't match, and now they're stuck recycling rumors while you rewrite reality. Every breath you take outside their orbit is a reminder that they failed, not because they couldn't destroy you, but because they tried in the first place. They talk about you in past tense, not realizing your legacy is still unfolding. You don't need a stage anymore. You are the show. They burned bridges, expecting you to drown, but you learned to swim in fire, built boats from the ashes. And now, while they're still clinging to lifeboats made of ego and denial, you're steering a warship of consequence. They confuse survival with significance. But you didn't survive to be significant. You became significant by surviving. They made you bleed, but forgot that blood writes the best scriptures. And now your story is tattooed across timelines they can't escape. Every move you make now is a reminder, not of what they did to you, but of what you did with it. They don't fear your wrath, they fear your growth, because rage fades. But evolution, that leaves scars. You evolved past their reach, past their relevance. They thought they could define you, but you erased every label with results they can't replicate. You don't speak of them, not because you've forgotten, but because they don't deserve the echo. You've moved on in a way that feels like punishment, because nothing destroys narcissists faster than realizing they no longer have an audience. They weren't prepared for your silence to echo louder than their noise, but it does, because now the rooms they enter feel colder. The mirrors hit harder. The applause feels faker. They roam with your name stitched into the back of their minds like a caution sign they'll never admit they need. You don't even have to retaliate. Life does it for you. Their masks are cracking. Their alliances are dissolving. And the weight of their own performance is breaking their backs. You just keep walking, unbothered, unmatched, unforgiven. Because forgiveness? That's not on your itinerary. Growth doesn't always wear white robes and angel wings. Sometimes it wears black boots and a smirk that knows too much. You are the justice that doesn't knock, the aftermath that doesn't apologize, the conclusion they prayed would never come. You don't have to shout. Your silence is a sermon, and every word they speak now is just a confession wrapped in denial. You didn't need to expose them. They did that by simply existing too long without you. And now the whole world watches as they shrink in the absence of the one they tried to bury. But you're not watching. You're moving, calculating, creating. And the momentum is terrifying to them, because you've become untouchable, not because you hide, but because you no longer care to respond. And when you stop responding, the powerful grow paranoid. They fear what they can't predict. And you now are a storm with no forecast, a reckoning with no schedule, a consequence with no remorse. And still, you rise. Not because they doubted you, but because you were never built to crawl. You were always the blade. They just took too long to realize they were standing beneath it. And that silence they hear now, it isn't peace. It's the sound of the guillotine being hoisted again. Slowly, patiently, not out of rage, but ritual. Because vengeance isn't chaos when you master it. It's art. And now, you're the artist painting in bloodless strokes, each motion crafted with the memory of every scar they etched across your back. You no longer carry the burden they do. You no longer need to speak your truth. It breathes for you. It walks into rooms before you. It keeps them awake while you sleep soundly for the first time in years. They forged the blade, but you made it divine. They thought they were building a spectacle when they cast you out. branding you broken, lost, finished. But they forgot that exiles become legends. They forgot that martyrs don't stay dead. They forgot that the guillotine doesn't just fall, it waits, hovering over prideful necks, measuring trembles in silence. You don't need to chase them anymore. You've become the gravity beneath their collapse. They stumble on stages built from your discarded bones, still trying to wear crowns made of borrowed thorns. But everything they do now smells like desperation, masked as dominance. And the audience sees it. Oh yes, the world sees now. What they tried to hide, what they tried to burn, what they tried to bury beneath shallow lies and smug grins, it bloomed anyway, like a black rose in a wasteland. You didn't just survive the execution, you rose from the ashes with the executioner's axe in your hand. And now they can't walk into a single room without feeling your breath on their legacy, because their legacy is cracking, their image is flickering, their illusions are bleeding truth, and you're just watching, unmoved, unmerciful, unmistakably changed. They come around now with hesitant eyes and reluctant tongues, speaking your name like a spell they're afraid might actually summon something. And it will, because you're not who you were. You're something else now, something that wears silence like a crown and vengeance like a second skin. You're not just their consequence, you're their curriculum. They study you now, backwards and in fear, trying to understand how the one they dismissed became the force that dismantled everything they thought was secure. But it's too late. The test already began. And they showed up unprepared. You don't seek closure anymore. You are the closing chapter. The end credits rolling over the ruins of every fake alliance, every passive-aggressive slight, every whispered betrayal. They gave you the role of the villain in their story, but forgot one thing. Villains survive. Heroes burn out. But villains evolve. And when they evolve into something beyond pain, beyond fear, beyond validation, that's when power becomes prophecy. And prophecy doesn't ask permission. It doesn't knock. It erupts. Now, you enter without introductions. Your energy says it all. Rooms shift, eyes drop. Voices quiver behind polite smiles, because they know, they remember. They feel it before they hear it, that pressure in the chest, that instinct that screams, you shouldn't have touched the blade if you weren't ready to bleed. They rewrote the script to erase you, but now their roles feel hollow. Their applause sounds thin. Their audience is leaving, one by one, walking toward the truth you embodied in silence. And you've got no time for applause, no craving for credit, because the guillotine doesn't celebrate the fall. It simply ensures it. You don't need revenge porn or public spectacles. Your legacy is the spectacle. You live in the consequence. Every empire they tried to build atop your bones now sinks into the soil you poisoned with dignity. And dignity once betrayed doesn't rot, it sharpens. Your grace became a blade. Your composure became a curse. They thought they were ending you. Instead, they authored their own downfall. And now, their reputations rot from the inside out, hollowed by karma disguised as coincidence. They hear their own names whispered with suspicion. Their alliances fracture beneath the weight of your absence. The people they tried to impress now scroll past them. Because influence built on arrogance dies quickly in the face of authentic resurgence. You don't need to scream. The silence they suffocated you with has turned into their echo chamber, and it's screaming you back at them. Their hands shake. when they reach for the same tools they once used to tear you down. Because now those tools don't work. The smear campaigns collapse. The manipulation rings hollow. The gossip evaporates on impact. Because your name now carries a gravity they can't escape. A gravity that pulls truth to the surface, that suffocates pretense, that crushes ego. They made the mistake of thinking power lies in control. But real power lies in release. And you let go of everything they tried to hold over your head. Now your name is no longer a target, it's a trigger. They flinch when it's mentioned. They overreact. They spiral. Because they know you know. Not the half-truths, not the narratives. You know the core of who they are. And worse, you don't care anymore. And that indifference? That's the blade they never saw coming. That's the weapon that slices deeper than vengeance ever could. You've made peace with your rage, and now that rage wears a smile instead of scars. Calm, controlled, cruel in its precision. So walk. Not with vengeance in your steps, but with the weight of inevitability. You've transcended every lie, every backstab, every manipulation dressed as concern. You didn't rise despite what they did, you rose because of it. And that's what they'll never recover from. Not your success, not your peace, but the undeniable fact that they made you unstoppable, that their attempts to destroy you were the very flames that forged your blade. You've become the punishment they gave themselves. You didn't just survive the execution. You stole the executioner's throne. And now, every time they move, they feel watched. Every time they speak, they feel unheard. Every time they breathe, they wonder if this is the moment the guillotine finally drops. Not with noise, not with spectacle, but with the cold, clean precision of a force that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. Because this story was never about the head they tried to take. It was always about the blade they forgot you already were. And now, it's too late to run, too late to apologize, too late to pretend, because you're not hunting them anymore. You've already won.